Welcome back, folks. So I'm doing another update on the Xbox One internally liquid-cooled build. Now, as you can see, I've done a number of things in here that have basically put everything inside now versus what you've been seeing before. So as you can see in here, what I have currently got going on is on the left here, we've got the pump. So that's now fully inside. The Wi-Fi card is going to be mounted against the back there. You can also see that I've moved the front plate over into this corner right here, and then the hard disk is going to be sitting on top. Now, what I've spent quite a bit of time doing today is I actually got this old Crucial SSD that I had lying around working in this little SATA adapter, so that's going to be sitting right on top of the front plate board there. So all my games and stuff is on there, and that's been working just fine. I've also now got the loop sorted. You can also see these guys are all inside. There's the disk drive right there. And last but not least, I also have my drain port off on this side, which will eventually get mounted into some kind of plexiglass. But as typical for all my builds, of course, something goes wrong. Right after I leak tested this guy, this fitting at the top right here decided to give up on life and leaked basically all over the MOSFETs on the right. So I'm hoping that the motherboard's not dead, but basically I'm just going to have to leave it alone and let it dry for a while, and hopefully come back and have it not be completely fried. But you know, fingers crossed. And you know, otherwise the build's been going pretty well. So I think that I've only got a couple things kind of left to tidy up in here. Unfortunately, I won't be able to utilize the digital flow meter as I had hoped to do because there's just simply a lack of space. If there was some way for me to minimize the size of the basically front plate adapter that connects to the controllers, etc., that would make life a little bit easier. But as it stands, I just don't think it's gonna fly because I also still need to mount basically a couple of other small electronics that are going to be powering A, the pump, and B, the 3 intake fans down below. So that's going to be sort of the next stage in this project to get it kind of to, its final place where it's going to be. Now, obviously, there's still quite a fair bit of work to do. I also still have to basically redo the mountings on the fans up in here so that they're, working okay. And then also I need to find a way to basically tie down both the hard disk, or sorry, the DVD drive, Blu-ray drive, and then also the actual radiators here, basically. But what I'm currently looking into is possibly replacing this stack with basically just like a cut down low profile CPU cooler and running coolant lines into the copper pipes on that cooler. So we'll see if that works out or not. Just because I've been seeing these guys get incredibly hot. One of the reasons being that cold plates are generally, meant to be run with a separate radiator. They're, basically their whole point is to wick away heat. But unfortunately, despite me mounting heat sinks on the bottom of them and then the fans directly next to that, they get pretty ridiculously hot, actually, after a couple of, minutes of gameplay, essentially. After about half an hour, they heat up to about, 50 degrees Celsius, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 110 or so Fahrenheit, so definitely not ideal. And I've seen it hit as high as 116 on the, basically just the cold plates themselves, and then also on the actual water block as well. So for the time being, this guy's going to have to come apart because I'm going to be doing basically a bunch of drying. I'm probably going to get some desiccant packets basically shipped to my house and then just drop it into a Ziploc bag full of desiccants so that it can wick away any water that's still left. I've also just blasted it with some Keg, basically electronic contact cleaner, just so that I can get rid of any potential rust that might happen. Now the loop is filled with ethylene glycol, which is basically, for anyone familiar, is just antifreeze. And it's also got a nice green tone to it, which matches the kind of mainboard color as well. And I'm thinking of going to stick to that because it's working out pretty well in terms of being a good coolant. And there's no dyes, which means nothing is getting stuck, and no weird additives kind of, gunking up the system or the pump. There's also, you guys can't really see it, but there's actually also a silver kill coil right in that little area right there to get rid of any bacterial growth that might end up happening in this loop, since the idea is to kind of just let it run for months on end you know, without doing any kind of service. But if I do want to do service, I have the drain port down there, and to that I can always hook up a vacuum line to just basically pull all the fluids out, so I don't have to keep running the pump. Now, for anybody who's curious what it is I'm using, I'll show you guys in just a second. So this is the tool that I use. It's basically a pneumatic or hydraulic brake bleeder, whatever you want to call it. It's got a little reservoir right here that connects to my drain ports down that area, and I simply squeeze this to basically pump, and it starts creating a vacuum in here at this area, and then once I pull the plug on the fill port up top, water basically starts draining into here because of the vacuum. So there's now a bunch of pressure, basically just pulling, negative pressure I should say, pulling this whole system through. So it makes it really easy to drain this whole loop, essentially because, you know, it's a horizontal loop, so it's very difficult to, you know, kind of clear it out. And I don't want to run the pump dry trying to pump fluids out of the system, because obviously it loses lubrication and then the whole thing dies. But as it stands, like I said, guys, it's going to have to wait for a little bit before I'm kind of able to finalize everything and get it to a state where, you know, it's all running. And then ultimately, I'll also need to kind of probably shorten some of these fan lines because the electronics connectors for them are just a little bit too long to stay inside the case. And since this will be the primary use for these fans, I'm not planning on recycling them anywhere else. I don't really care if the connectors aren't particularly long enough for any other kind of task. So this will do just fine for my purposes. Now, the other part is I also have to see whether or not I'm going to be able to actually tie these things down, or if just the pressure from the top case is going to be enough. But once all of that is essentially completely sorted, this guy will be running, and you'll see this whole thing in action. So stick around until my next video, and until my next kind of build log for everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.